2nd of January, 1967, 14:37 Indochina time, Hanoi Flight Information Region. 4 F-4C Phantoms from the 8th Tactical Fighter Wing push north at 18,000 feet, each carrying AIM-7 Sparrows rated for targets 30 miles away. The crews scan empty sky, trusting radar that promises safety in a Mach 2 world built for beyond visual range kills. A radio click cuts through the frequency, followed by a crisp voice in Vietnamese. Vector 270. 15 seconds later, MiG-21s appear approximately 2 kilometers behind the formation, already inside minimum engagement range. The Phantoms brake hard, jettison tanks, light afterburners, but 2 Americans eject before their aircraft cross 12,000 feet. No one fires a Sparrow. The war's most advanced fighters die in turning fights their designers never imagined. The Americans expect missile duels at altitude. North Vietnam delivers ambushes directed by ground controllers who see everything. The myth shatters in radio calls that rewrite air superiority. By 1965, the United States Air Force and Navy assume supersonic interceptors with radar-guided missiles have made dogfighting obsolete. The MiG-21 Fishbed, introduced to North Vietnamese service in 1966, confirms the assumption. It carries 2 K-13 atoll heat seekers, climbs at 45,000 feet per minute, and reaches Mach 2 at altitude. American planners expect the People's Air Force of Vietnam to fight like a smaller, poorer U.S. squadron, relying on individual pilot skill, radar, and speed. Intelligence briefs describe MiG-21 regiments as Soviet export units, capable but conventional. The 8th Tactical Fighter Wing at U-Bon and Carrier Air Wings in the Gulf of Tonkin train for intercepts, not ambushes. Doctrine assumes American formations will detect threats first, fire first, and maneuver only if missiles miss. No one questions whether North Vietnam might ignore the rulebook entirely. The myth lasts until ground control intercept networks prove radar belongs on the ground, not in the cockpit. North Vietnam's air defense system in 1966 does not center on pilots. It centers on ground control intercept officers who direct every move from concrete bunkers near Hanoi. The system begins with Soviet P-12 spoon rest and P-35 bar lock early warning radars that track American formations 200 miles out, feeding raw data to the Air Defense Air Force Command at Bac Mai. General Phung The Thai, commanding air operations in 1966 and 1967, organizes controllers into teams that assign intercept sectors, altitudes, and attack headings before MiGs leave the ground. Unlike American fighter radar with 30-mile range but narrow scan, the GCI network paints the entire battle space, every F-4, F-105, EB-66, tanker, and escort in real time. The 921st Fighter Regiment at Noi Bai and the 927th Fighter Regiment at Kep operate MiG-21s not as independent hunters, but as guided missiles with human pilots. Each sortie follows a strict script. GCI calls vectors, the pilot flies the heading without question, and controllers position the MiG behind the target formation at co-altitude or slightly below. North Vietnamese doctrine forbids freelancing. Discipline and obedience to ground instructions matter more than ace-level stick skills. The MiG-21's 2 K-13 atoll missiles carry small warheads and require firing inside approximately 2 kilometers per crew after action reports, forcing close-range intercepts where American radar advantage disappears. Pilots train for single-pass attacks, close to 1 kilometer, fire both missiles, break away before escorts react. The network hides MiGs at low altitude until the final vector. American airborne radar struggles to pick fighters from ground clutter below 5,000 feet. GCI officers time intercepts to coincide with moments when U.S. formations split for tanker rendezvous, target runs, or egress turns. A second radio click signals commit, and the MiG climbs at maximum rate, 45,000 feet per minute, closing the altitude gap in under 30 seconds. The Vietnamese call the final vector Vector 270 or Vector 090, cardinal headings that put the sun behind the attacker. By the time American radar warning receivers detect the MiG's high-fix radar, the enemy fighter sits approximately 3 kilometers back, inside Sparrow minimum range, outside visual identification distance. The system works because it separates detection from execution. Controllers see the entire fight, pilots see only the target. Speed and missiles matter, but only if positioned correctly by voices on the radio. North Vietnam turns the MiG-21 into a projectile, not a platform, precision guided by human minds, analyzing radar scopes 50 miles away. The Americans bring better planes, the Vietnamese build a better system. Where US doctrine trusts cockpit autonomy, North Vietnamese doctrine enforces centralized control that never blinks. The mechanism strips individual heroics from air combat and replaces it with choreographed ambushes. Every intercept follows the same pattern: detection, positioning, vector call, attack, egress, executed in under 3 minutes. The GCI network does not need 100 MiGs. 20 fighters directed perfectly achieve more than 200 flying blind. By late 1966, the system reaches operational maturity, and American losses begin climbing. The myth assumes technology wins, the mechanism proves organization wins. Radar belongs on the ground, watching everything. Pilots belong in the air, executing orders without hesitation. The radio call, Vector 270, becomes the signature of a new kind of air war. The Americans do not realize they are fighting a network, not airplanes. North Vietnam inverts the assumption that guided the missile age, and the U.S. has no doctrine to counter it. 2nd of January, 1967, Hanoi Flight Information Region, Operation Bolo, begins as the largest fighter sweep of the war, designed to lure MiG-21s into a trap using F-4C Phantoms disguised as bomb-laden F-105 Thunder Chiefs. Colonel Robin Olds, commanding the 8th Tactical Fighter Wing from Ubon Royal Thai Air Force Base, plans every detail. His F-4s fly F-105 call signs, altitudes, speeds, and routes, mimicking strike packages that MiGs have ambushed for weeks. Olds expects the North Vietnamese to take the bait and launch intercepts against what they believe are vulnerable bombers. The plan assumes MiG pilots will react predictably, climbing to intercept altitude and engaging in turning fights where the Phantom's thrust and teamwork will dominate. At 14:30 Indo-China time, Olds leads Olds Flight and Ford Flight, 8 F-4Cs, across the Red River near Yen Bai, holding 18,000 feet and 450 knots. The weather is terrible: 4,000-foot overcast, visibility under 2 miles, rain cells scattered across Hanoi's western approaches. American radar detects nothing. The sky appears empty. At Bac Mai, GCI controllers watch the F-4s on P-35 radar and recognize the formation. But they also spot the missing bomb loads, the tighter spacing, the loitering pattern. The controllers wait, refusing to commit MiGs until the moment offers advantage. Olds turns east toward Puxian Airfield, descending to 15,000 feet to stay below the clouds, exactly where GCI wants him. At 14:37 Indo-China time, a radio click sounds on North Vietnamese tactical frequencies, followed by the call Vector 270. 4 MiG-21s from the 901st Fighter Regiment, piloted by Nguyen Van Koch, Pham Thanh Ngan, and 2 wingmen, punch through the cloud deck at 12,000 feet. Approximately 4 kilometers behind Olds' flight, Olds' wingman calls, "MiGs, 6 o'clock low!" But the Phantoms are already defensive, breaking left into a hard turn that bleeds airspeed. The MiG-21s accelerate in afterburner, closing to approximately 1.5 kilometers in 8 seconds. Ngan fires first, both K-30 atolls at Olds' number 3, call sign Ford 3. 1 missile tracks, detonating approximately 20 meters behind the F-4's tailpipe. The aircraft rolls inverted, trailing fire, and both crewmen eject at 11,000 feet. Olds reverses, trying to gain separation for a Sparrow shot. But his radar locks onto rainwater, not metal. The MiGs do not dogfight. They fire, brake hard right, and dive back into the clouds before Olds completes his turn. GCI vectors them southwest toward another F-4 element climbing from Yen Bai. The controllers see opportunities Olds cannot. At 14:42 Indo-China time, the MiGs reappear approximately 3 kilometers behind Ford Flight's remaining aircraft, again inside minimum missile range. Cox fires both atolls at Ford 4, 1 missile guides, and the F-4 disintegrates at 13,500 feet. Olds calls for support, but his remaining Phantoms are scattered across 40 square miles of cloud, each crew reacting to threats they cannot see. The weather that was supposed to conceal Bolo's deception now blinds the Americans while GCI tracks everything. By 14:50 Indo-China time, the MiGs are back at Noi Bai, refueling. Bolo deception succeeds. F-4Cs down multiple MiG-21s with no F-4 losses in the ambush. Across all Bolo flights that day, American pilots claimed 7 MiG-21s destroyed, a number later revised to 4 confirmed kills. The operation validates the concept: superior numbers and positioning can overwhelm GCI when Americans control geometry, but the lesson cuts both ways. Whenever GCI positions MiGs behind US formations first, the kills go to North Vietnam. The plan works when American pilots see the enemy first and deny the network time to reposition. When weather or timing favors GCI, the network exploits every gap. Colonel Robin Olds later says, "We planned the perfect ambush, but they ambushed us inside it." The GCI network sees through Bolo's deception because radar does not care about call signs or flight profiles. It tracks metal, and the network recognizes patterns faster than pilots recognize danger. North Vietnamese controllers do not react to bait. They wait for bait to become vulnerable. The 921st Fighter Regiment does not chase glory, it executes vectors. Olds expects a World War II-style furball where speed and numbers decide outcomes. Instead, he encounters a system that treats fighter pilots as precision instruments, guided by minds that see the entire battle space. The weather that day works both ways. Clouds conceal American intentions but also hide MiG approaches until GCI calls the commit. The intercept at 14:37 Indochina time is not improvised. Controllers have been watching Olds since he crossed the Laotian border 40 minutes earlier. The radio call, Vector 270, positions Kok and Ngan perfectly when weather allows, co-altitude, behind, inside missile range, with the sun at their backs. Olds' plan assumes MiG pilots will make mistakes. The GCI system ensures they do not need to improvise. The Americans bring better planes and better training. The Vietnamese bring perfect information and absolute discipline. Bolo proves that ambushing the ambushers requires more than clever tactics. It requires blinding the network. When the network sees clearly, it withholds fights unless geometry is favorable. Olds cannot blind what he does not know exists. Not superior fighters, but superior timing. The MiG-21 is not the weapon. The radio call is the weapon. 19th of May, 1967, 15:20 Indochina time, skies northwest of Hanoi. 4 F-4D Phantoms from the 555th Tactical Fighter Squadron escort a strike package targeting the Yen by railroad yards, flying combat air patrol at 22,000 feet. The formation, call sign Harlow Flight, scans radar for threats while EB-66, electronic warfare aircraft, jam North Vietnamese early warning frequencies 60 miles east. The Americans assume jamming blinds GCI. The assumption is wrong. Soviet P-35 bar-lock radars operate on frequencies outside the EB-66's jamming band, per crew after-action reports, and backup P-12 spoon rest sets fill gaps when primary radars go dark. At Bac Mai, controllers track Harlow Flight in real time, watching altitude, heading, and spacing. Data, the Americans believe, is denied. The 921st Fighter Regiment scrambles 4 MiG-21s from Noi Bai at 15:10 Indochina time, climbing to 15,000 feet and holding a racetrack pattern 40 miles northwest of the city. GCI does not vector the MiGs toward the Americans. Instead, controllers wait for Harlow Flight to complete its escort leg and turn southwest toward the tanker rendezvous. At 15:18 Indochina time, Harlow Lead begins his turn, descending to 20,000 feet and reducing speed to 380 knots, standard procedure for joining tankers. The formation spreads from 1-mile tactical spacing to 3-mile cruise spacing, a predictable transition that GCI has observed in over 200 previous missions. A radio click sounds, then Vector 090. The MiG-21s roll east, descending to 18,000 feet and accelerating to 600 knots, closing angle and altitude gap in approximately 90 seconds. Harlow Flight's radar warning receivers remain silent. The MiGs are not using their high-fix radars yet, and GCI has positioned them outside detection range. At 15:20 Indochina time, the MiGs activate radar, achieving lock at approximately 4 kilometers. But Harlow's RWR finally screams warnings. Harlow 3 calls bandits, 4 o'clock high. But the geometry is already wrong. The MiGs are high and fast, converting altitude into speed while the Phantoms are low and slow, configured for tanker rendezvous. Harlow Lead lights afterburners and jettisons external tanks. But 20,000 pounds of thrust cannot instantly overcome inertia. The lead MiG-21, flown by Lieutenant Pham Thanh Ngan, closes to approximately 2 kilometers and fires both K-13 atolls at Harlow 4. One missile tracks, striking the F-4D's left engine. The aircraft rolls inverted, trailing fire, and the crew ejects at 18,500 feet. Harlow Lead reverses into the attack, trying to convert his speed deficit into a nose position, but the MiGs do not follow. They continue east, extending away at Mach 1.2. GCI vectors the MiGs into a climbing left turn that brings them back toward Harlow Flight from a new angle, again outside American radar coverage. At 15:23 Indochina time, the MiGs reappear, this time approximately 5 kilometers north, diving from 25,000 feet with the sun behind them. Harlow 2 attempts a sparrow shot, but his APQ-109 radar cannot maintain lock in the clutter of the dive. The missile flies ballistic and self-destructs at 8,000 feet. The second MiG-21 pilot fires at Harlow 3, scoring a near miss that damages the Phantom's hydraulics. The crew limps back to Ubon with one flight control system. The entire engagement lasts 4 minutes. The MiGs fire 6 to 8 missiles per after-action reports, achieve 1 kill and 1 damage, and never enter a sustained turning fight. Harlow flight returns claiming engagement broken by enemy disengagement, a phrase that appears in 60% of unsuccessful F-4 intercept reports between May and August of 1967. The Americans do not realize they are fighting a scripted sequence. Every maneuver the MiGs execute was planned on the ground before takeoff. Lieutenant Pham Thanh Ngan later says, "I fly the heading they give me. I do not think about tactics. I execute." The GCI system does not react to American jamming. It routes around it using redundant radar bands and operators trained to read partial data. The EB-66 jams frequencies the North Vietnamese abandoned in 1966, forcing U.S. planners to believe their electronic warfare is effective when it is actually irrelevant. The intercept at 1520 Indo-China time is timed to exploit the most vulnerable moment in the American mission profile, the transition from combat spread to cruise formation. GCI has catalogued this moment across hundreds of sorties, noting that U.S. fighters consistently reduce speed and spacing during tanker rendezvous. The 921st Fighter Regiment does not hunt randomly. It waits for instructions that deliver targets already positioned for maximum advantage. Ngan does not need to outfly Harlow flight. He needs only to execute the vector and fire inside the atoll's envelope. The system eliminates guesswork, hesitation, and wasted fuel. Every MiG sortie is a precision strike. American doctrine assumes individual pilots will detect threats, assess options, and choose tactics in real time. North Vietnamese doctrine assumes pilots will follow orders without deviation because the ground controller has better information. Harlow flight fights blind, relying on radar that scans 30 miles in a narrow cone. The GCI network sees 200 miles in every direction, painting threats Harlow never detects until missiles are in the air. The Phantom's speed and missile range are irrelevant if the crew does not know where to point the aircraft. The MiG-21's limitations, short range, small missile load, minimal radar, become strengths when the network handles targeting. Ngan is not a better pilot than Harlow lead. He is a better positioned pilot. The system creates positions where mediocre pilots win against excellent ones. The Americans blame bad luck, weather, jamming failures, and pilot error. The Vietnamese credit discipline, patience, and radio calls that always position MiGs behind formations, not in front. Not better technology, but better choreography. The network wins because it never stops watching. 23rd of August, 1967, 16:05 Indo-China time, airspace near Kep. Colonel Nguyen Van Kok, the 921st Fighter Regiment's most experienced pilot, climbs through 18,000 feet in a MiG-21 PF, listening to ground control intercept vectors that guide him toward 4 F-4D Phantoms from the 435th Tactical Fighter Squadron. Kok has flown 42 combat sorties and achieved 6 confirmed kills, but he does not consider himself an ace. He considers himself a disciplined instrument of the network. The Phantoms, call sign Pistol Flight, are returning from a strike on the Jong Phong Thuong rail siding, descending through 20,000 feet at 420 knots, with fuel states forcing them toward the tanker track. At Bach Mai, GCI controllers watch Pistol Flight's trajectory and calculate the intercept geometry. The F-4s are crossing directly over Kep Airfield at 16:08 Indo-China time, a rare opportunity to launch MiGs with 0 transit time. Kok receives his vector at 16:03 Indo-China time, climb to 6,000 meters, turn heading 180, commit on command. He acknowledges, advances throttle to full military power, and holds his heading without deviation. Trusting the controller who sees radar returns, Kok cannot. The Americans do not know Kep is active. Intelligence reports list the base as secondary with limited MiG-21 presence, an assessment derived from photo reconnaissance that missed underground revetments built in July. At 16:07 Indo-China time, Pistol Flight crosses directly overhead Kep at 19,000 feet, unaware that Kok is 3,000 feet below them, climbing at 45,000 feet per minute, co-speed, and perfectly positioned. GCI calls, commit, target approximately 2 kilometers, 090 relative. Kok's high-fix radar locks instantly. The Phantom is above him, silhouetted against bright overcast. exactly where the controller said it would be. He pulls 4 Gs, climbing into firing position, and stabilizes at approximately 1.2 kilometers behind Pistol 3. The F-4D's radar warning receiver activates, but the crew assumes it is ground radar, not an airborne threat. They have detected no MiGs on their APQ-109. COC fires both K-13 atolls at 16:08:15 Indochina time. Both missiles guide. The first atoll strikes Pistol 3's right engine. The second detonates near the tail, severing hydraulic lines. The F-4D enters an uncontrollable roll, and the crew ejects at 17,500 feet. Koch does not follow the crippled Phantom. He brakes hard left, extends at maximum speed, and dives back through 10,000 feet, following GCI instructions to egress northwest. Pistol lead reverses to engage, acquiring a radar contact 8 miles west, but it is ground clutter near Kep's runway, not a MiG. By the time Pistol flight sorts valid targets from false returns, Koch is 15 miles away, descending through a gap in surface-to-air missile coverage that GCI pre-cleared for his egress. The engagement lasts 62 seconds from commit to egress. Koch never exceeds 6 Gs or enters a sustained turn. Pistol flight returns to base, reporting unexpected MiG-21 intercept, origin unknown, no radar warning prior to missile launch. The after-action report catalogues the loss as bad luck and perfect MiG timing. But the truth is simpler. GCI positioned Koch exactly where he needed to be when pistol flight was most vulnerable. Colonel Nguyen Van Koch later says, "I do not hunt the enemy. The controller places me on the enemy's back." The intercept over Kep proves that airfield location matters less than network integration. Kep is not a major base, but it is perfectly positioned under GCI coverage and inside the Hanoi defensive zone. American intelligence focuses on counting aircraft at bases, missing the reality that North Vietnam's strength is not inventory, but coordination. The 921st Fighter Regiment operates 18 MiG-21s total across 3 airfields, a number U.S. planners dismiss as insignificant, but 18 fighters directed perfectly achieve more kills than 100 fighters hunting blindly. Koch does not need situational awareness beyond his cockpit instruments. The GCI controller is his situational awareness. The call, commit target, approximately 2 kilometers, 090 relative delivers exact range, bearing, and aspect. Information no pilot-mounted radar can provide with equivalent precision. The Americans invest millions in APQ-109 radars that scan 30 miles but struggle with ground clutter and require constant operator input. The Vietnamese invest thousands in radio discipline and trust, creating a system where pilots fly headings without question because the network has never been wrong. Pistol flight's radar detects nothing because Koch's MiG-21 approaches from below, inside the Phantom's radar's minimum elevation scan. The F-4D's design assumes threats will come from ahead or level. North Vietnamese tactics exploit the blind spot underneath. Koch's positioning is not skill, it is precision guidance delivered over a radio link. The crew of Pistol 3 has no chance to react. By the time their RWR alerts them, missiles are already in flight. The engagement proves that surprise is not a function of stealth or speed, but of information asymmetry. GCI owns the information. American pilots own only their cockpit's limited view. Koch later flies 72 additional combat sorties, achieving 9 total confirmed kills, and every engagement follows the same pattern: vector, commit, fire, egress. He never dogfights. The system does not require it. Americans. Intelligence eventually identifies Koch as a high-threat pilot. But the designation misses the point. Koch is high-threat only because the network makes him high-threat. Remove the GCI link, and Koch is a competent pilot with average skills. Connect him to the network, and he is a guided weapon. The Americans train for dogfights. The Vietnamese engineer ambushes. The Phantom carries better missiles, better radar, and more fuel. The MiG-21 carries better positioning, delivered by voices that never stop watching. Not the best pilot, but the best positioned pilot. The radio call creates the kill. Everything else is execution. 10th of May, 1972, 10:18 Indochina time, skies above Haiphong, a Navy F-4J Phantom, call sign Granite 100, escorts an Alpha strike against the Hai Duong rail yard. The crew has multiple MiG kills and a reputation as aggressive fighters who do not wait for ground controllers to approve intercepts. At 10:15 Indochina time, Granite 100 detects a radar contact 25 miles northwest, altitude 8,000 feet, heading southeast, a MiG-17 or MiG-21, ambiguous on the APG-59 radar but clearly hostile. The pilot pushes throttles forward, accelerating to 550 knots, and begins a slicing descent to gain energy advantage. The contact turns east, parallel to the coast, and Granite 100 follows, assuming the MiG is attempting to escape toward Kep Airfield. At Bak Mai, GCI controllers watch Granite 100 abandon the strike package and give chase, exactly the reaction they want. The MiG is bait, flown by a 927th Fighter Regiment pilot under strict instructions: fly straight, do not engage, lure the Americans north. At 10:17 Indochina time, GCI vectors 4 MiG-21s from the 921st Fighter Regiment to intercept Granite 100 from the east, positioning them at 12,000 feet with a 90-degree angle off the F-4's tail. A radio click then, Vector 270. The MiG-21s roll left, descending to 9,000 feet, and accelerate to Mach 1.1, closing the range to Granite 100 in approximately 45 seconds. The REO detects the new contacts at 15 miles, but the radar displays 4 targets in a tight formation. He cannot determine hostile intent until they maneuver. The MiG-21s do not maneuver. They fly straight at Granite 100, forcing the crew to assume they are additional strikers or barcap returning to carriers. At 10:18 Indochina time, the lead MiG-21 fires both K-13 atolls at approximately 3 kilometers inside the range where Granite 100's radar can discriminate missiles from aircraft. The pilot sees smoke trails and brakes hard right, pulling 7 Gs and deploying chaff. The atolls lose lock and self-destruct at approximately 1 kilometer. The RIO calls engaged hostile. 4 MiG-21s break left, but the pilot is already defensive, bleeding airspeed in a turn that drops the F-4J from 550 knots to 320 knots in approximately 8 seconds. The MiG-21s do not follow into the turn. They extend east, climbing back to 15,000 feet, while GCI calls a new vector. The pilot reverses, attempting to gain separation and reacquire radar lock, but the MiGs are already repositioning under GCI guidance. At 10:19 Indochina time, the MiG-21s come back, this time from the south, diving from 16,000 feet with the sun at their backs. The pilot sees them early, 5 miles, and maneuvers to force a head-on pass, denying the MiGs a tail aspect. The MiGs do not take the pass. They break away before entering AIM-9 range, extending west while GCI calculates a third approach. For 4 minutes, the pattern repeats. The MiGs attack, Granite 100 defends, the MiGs disengage before the fight stabilizes. Granite 100 burns fuel at maximum rate, dropping from 8,000 pounds to 3,500 pounds, the threshold for leaving the combat zone. At 10:22 Indochina time, the pilot disengages, turning southeast toward the carrier while the MiG-21s follow at 8 miles, too far for a shot but close enough to prevent Granite 100 from rejoining the strike package. The MiGs break off at 10:24 Indochina time, returning to Kep with ammunition remaining and full fuel tanks. They have achieved their mission without firing all their missiles. Granite 100 lands on its carrier at 11:05 Indochina time with 1,200 pounds of fuel remaining, the crew frustrated that they could not close for a kill. The engagement pattern, bait, bracket, fuel drain, appears in multiple Navy after-action reports from May and June of 1972, proving that the GCI system has evolved beyond simple ambushes. By 1972, controllers orchestrate extended pursuits that drain American fuel, force defensive maneuvering, and isolate escorts from strike packages. These intercepts are not designed to kill every fighter. They are designed to remove escorts from the battle. The MiG-21s fire 6 to 8 missiles per composite after-action reports, total, few of which guide to impact, but the missions succeed because American fighters spend minutes defensive and exit combat zones with minimum fuel. Strike packages lose aircraft to SAMs during windows when escorts are unavailable, a trade North Vietnam accepts. GCI does not need to destroy every American fighter. It needs to neutralize them at critical moments. The network calculates fuel burn rates, engagement timelines, and escort coverage gaps, treating air combat as a resource management problem rather than a pilot skill contest. Superior pilots flying superior aircraft cannot corner opponents when the enemy refuses to fight on their terms. The MiG-21s never enter sustained turning engagements where the F-4J's thrust and teamwork would dominate. They attack, extend, reposition, and attack again, always from angles GCI calculates. Will force defensive breaks. American pilots cannot outfly the network. They can only burn fuel reacting to vectors they cannot predict. American doctrine assumes that superior pilots flying superior aircraft will eventually corner and kill inferior opponents. North Vietnamese doctrine assumes that superior information allows inferior aircraft to avoid being cornered. The 921st Fighter Regiment's standing orders for 1972 explicitly state, never dogfight, execute vectors, fire, extend, The orders eliminate pilot discretion, ensuring every engagement follows GCI script. American crews want dogfights. The network gives them fuel emergencies. The MiGs spend 18 minutes airborne. American escorts spend over 50 minutes airborne, burning 3 times the fuel for 0 kills. The math favors North Vietnam. 1 gallon of MiG fuel negates 3 gallons of American fuel. Not faster jets, but smarter allocation. The network wins by deciding what fight happens, not by winning the fight offered. By December of 1972, the pattern is undeniable. American fighters with better speed, better missiles, and better training consistently lose situational awareness to an enemy that owns the entire battlespace through radar and radio. General William W. Momia, 7th Air Force commander from 1966 to 1968, later admits the problem was structural, not tactical. He says, "We fought pilots, they deployed a system. The radio call Vector 270 defines every failure." 27th of December, 1972, 11:42, Indochina time, Hanoi. The final major engagement of Linebacker 2 occurs as B-52 Stratofortresses complete their 11th night of raids against the capital's remaining strategic targets. The bombing campaign, intended to force North Vietnam back to negotiations, has dropped 20,000 tons of ordnance in 11 days, destroying rail yards, power plants, and SAM storage sites. American commanders believe the air defense network is collapsing. SAM inventories are nearly exhausted, radar sites are damaged, and MiG sorties have declined from 15 per day to fewer than 5. At Bach Mai, GCI controllers disagree with the assessment. They have conserved MiG-21s deliberately, waiting for the moment when American confidence peaks and defensive discipline weakens. The 921st and 927th Fighter Regiments hold 12 operational MiG-21s, distributed across Noi Bai, Kep, and Gia Lam, enough for 3 waves of 4-ship intercepts if positioned perfectly. GCI has catalogued Linebacker 2 flight patterns for 10 days. B-52s approach from the west in 3-ship cells, F-4 escorts fly MiG-cap 40 miles ahead, and EB-66 jamming aircraft orbit 60 miles south. The pattern creates a predictable gap. A 12-minute window after the B-52 cells cross Hanoi when F-4 escorts turn southwest toward tankers, leaving bombers covered only by tail gunners and chaff corridors. On the 27th of December, GCI decides to exploit the gap, launching 8 MiG-21s in 2 waves, timed to intercept the final B-52 cell at 11:45 Indochina time. At 11:38 Indochina time, 4 F-4Es from the 422nd Tactical Fighter Wing complete their MiG-cap sweep, detect no threats, and turn southwest toward the tanker track, exactly as GCI predicted. The B-52 cell, call sign Ash, continues northwest at 32,000 feet, guarded by chaff and electronic countermeasures, but no fighters. At 11:40 Indochina time, Ground Control Intercept vectors, the first MiG-21 wave, climb to 10,000 meters, heading 360, commit in 90 seconds. The MiGs climb at maximum rate, using afterburner to reach 33,000 feet before the F-4Es can reverse and return. At 11:42 Indochina time, the MiG-21s roll in from the north, diving at 15-degree angle, closing on Ash 2 at 800 knots. Speed that denies the B-52's tail guns time to track. The lead MiG fires both K-13 atolls at approximately 2.5 kilometers, 1 missile guides detonating below the bomber's wing route. Ash 2 does not explode. The missile's small warhead damages fuel tanks and hydraulics but leaves the aircraft flyable. The MiGs extend east, climbing back to 35,000 feet, while GCI calls a new vector for the second wave. At 11:44 Indochina time, 4 additional MiG-21s approach from the east. Time to intercept Ash 2 as the crippled bomber descends through 28,000 feet, trailing fuel vapor. The second wave closes to approximately 1.8 kilometers and fires 6 to 8 missiles per after-action reports. 3 guide, and Ash 2 breaks apart at 26,500 feet. VPAF credits MiG-21 intercept. USAF and Strategic Air Command post-mission analyses attribute loss to SA-2 surface-to-air missile based on radar tracking and debris field patterns. GCI exploited the escort gap regardless, positioning MiGs or coordinating SAM batteries during the 12-minute window when F-4Es refueled. The F-4Es return at 11:47 Indochina time, 3 minutes too late, and engage the second MiG wave in a turning fight that lasts 90 seconds before the MiGs disengage. 1 MiG-21 is hit by an AIM-9 Sidewinder and crashes near Gia Lam. The remaining 7 return to base with fuel remaining. The engagement proves the network remains operational despite 11 days of bombing. GCI radars are damaged, but backup systems and manual plotting ensure continuous coverage. The loss of Ash-2 shocks American commanders who believed high-altitude bombers defended by chaff and jamming were invulnerable. Post-mission analysis reveals the truth. GCI positioned assets perfectly by exploiting the 12-minute gap when escorts refueled, a predictable vulnerability the network catalogued and exploited. The radio call, Vector 360, placed 8 MiG-21s exactly where they needed to be at the exact moment when a damaged B-52 was most vulnerable. The system does not rely on luck or pilot heroics. It relies on discipline, timing, and information superiority. General Pung the Thai later says, "We did not defeat their bombers. We studied their patterns and placed fighters in the gaps." The 27th of December engagement is the GCI system's final vindication. Even under sustained bombing, even with depleted inventories, even with damaged radars, the network continues to deliver precision ambushes that American technology cannot counter. Between January of 1967 and December of 1972, North Vietnamese MiG-21s fly approximately 1,200 combat sorties and achieve between 60 and 90 confirmed kills, based on US and VPAF source reconciliation, depending on attribution criteria. US losses to MiG-21s represent approximately 15% of all aircraft lost over North Vietnam during the period, a figure that understates the weapon's impact on American operations. The real cost is not aircraft destroyed, but missions disrupted, strike packages diverted, escorts burned dry, targets left untouched because MiGs forced defensive maneuvering at critical moments. The F-4 Phantom and F-105 Thunderchief are faster, better armed, and more sophisticated than the MiG-21, but speed and technology do not matter when the enemy owns the information environment. The Americans build cockpits that scan 30 miles, North Vietnam builds networks that scan 200 miles and route fighters through the gaps. Every intercept follows the same mechanics. Early warning radar detects formations. Controllers calculate intercept geometry. Radio calls position MiGs behind targets. Pilots execute without deviation. The system eliminates variables, weather, pilot skill, fuel constraints, missile reliability, by planning around them rather than reacting to them. GCI does not hope for lucky encounters. It engineers high-probability intercepts and repeats them 1,200 times. American pilots describe the experience as fighting ghosts. MiGs appear, fire, vanish, and reappear from new angles, never staying long enough to be cornered. The ghosts are not supernatural. They are radio-guided, repositioned by controllers who see the entire fight unfolding on radar scopes. The MiG-21 is not a wonder weapon. It is a mediocre interceptor with short range, minimal payload, and basic radar. The wonder is the network that turns mediocrity into lethality. The radio call, Vector 270, becomes the signature of North Vietnamese air defense, 3 syllables that reposition fighters with surgical precision. American doctrine in 1965 assumes individual fighters will dominate through superior technology and pilot skill. North Vietnamese doctrine in 1966 assumes centralized control will dominate through superior information and coordination. The assumption defines the war's outcome in the air. The Americans bring better planes, the Vietnamese build a better system. By 1973, U.S. fighter crews train for GCI-directed threats, developing tactics to break radar locks and evade vectored intercepts. The adaptation comes too late to change the war, but it shapes every air-to-air engagement afterward. The F-15 Eagle, introduced in 1976, includes look-down, shoot-down radar, specifically to counter low-altitude approaches directed by ground controllers. The lesson is permanent. Technology alone does not guarantee air superiority. Information superiority decides who controls the sky. The MiG-21 proves that a simple, affordable fighter integrated into a disciplined network outperforms expensive autonomous platforms flying blind. The 921st and 927th Fighter Regiments operate throughout the war with fewer than 40 pilots and 25 aircraft, a force 1/10 the size of a single U.S. carrier air wing. They achieve kill ratios between 1:1 and 1.5:1 against the most advanced fighters in the world, not through superiority, but through orchestration. The network sees everything, the pilots execute perfectly, the radio calls never stop. Colonel Nguyen Van Kock finishes the war with 9 confirmed kills, making him North Vietnam's highest-scoring MiG-21 pilot. He later states that he does not consider himself an ace. He considers himself a disciplined soldier who followed instructions. Lieutenant Pham Thanh Ngan achieves 8 confirmed kills and survives 96 combat sorties, crediting every success to Ground Control Intercept officers who positioned him perfectly. Neither pilot claims individual genius. Both credit the system that made their kills possible. The American aces, Robin Olds, Randy Cunningham, Steve Ritchie, achieved their victories through aggression, skill, and improvisation. The Vietnamese aces achieved their victories through patience, discipline, and obedience to voices on the radio. Both approaches work, but only one scales. Improvisation requires exceptional pilots, while discipline requires only adequate pilots and perfect information. North Vietnam cannot afford exceptional pilots. It builds a system that does not need them. The radio call Vector 270 echoes through 1,200 sorties, positioning MiGs behind formations that never see the threat until missiles are in flight. The call is not dramatic. It is cold, precise, mechanical, a system at work. The myth assumes missile-age air combat will be decided by radar-guided beyond visual range engagements, where the faster, better-armed fighter wins. The reality is knife fights orchestrated by ground controllers who see the entire battle space and position their fighters for close-range kills. The Americans expect a technological war. North Vietnam delivers an organizational war. The MiG-21 does not win because it is better. It wins because the network around it is better. The F-4 Phantom does not lose because it is inferior. It loses because American doctrine does not account for an enemy that treats air combat as a centrally planned operation. The lesson is brutal. Individual excellence matters less than collective coordination. The Americans learn it slowly, painfully, across 6 years of engagements where superior aircraft consistently lose situational awareness. By December of 1972, the lesson is undeniable, carved into loss reports and after-action reviews that all conclude the same way. The enemy owns the information, and information decides the fight. The radio call is the weapon, the missile is just the delivery system, the MiG-21 is the projectile, the Ground Control Intercept network is the gun. The Americans bring better bullets, the Vietnamese aim better, not faster planes, but better positioning, not individual heroics, but collective precision. The network wins because it never stops watching, never stops calculating, never stops calling vectors that place mediocre fighters in perfect positions to kill the best aircraft in the world. The Paris Peace Accords in January of 1973 end direct U.S. combat operations over North Vietnam, freezing the air war at a stalemate where neither side achieves total dominance. American forces withdraw with better aircraft, better missiles, and better trained pilots, but without a doctrinal answer to centralized ground control that outthinks autonomous cockpit decision-making. The North Vietnamese Air Force retains its Ground Control Intercept network, 2 MiG-21 regiments, and the institutional memory of 1,200 combat sorties where discipline and information defeated speed and technology. The MiG-21 remains in service until 1980, eventually replaced by MiG-23s and Su-22s, but the GCI system persists unchanged. Proof that the weapon was never the aircraft. U.S. Air Force and Navy fighter schools redesigned curricula in 1973, adding sections on defeating radar-vectored threats, evading ground-directed intercepts, and recognizing the signatures of centralized control. The changes come too late for the 60 to 90 crews lost to MiG-21 ambushes between 1967 and 1972, but they shaped the next generation of American air doctrine. The F-15 Eagle, entering service in 1976, incorporates look-down, shoot-down radar, data link architecture, and beyond visual range missiles specifically designed to counter GCI-directed threats. The lessons from Hanoi's skies become the foundation for modern network-centric warfare, where information superiority matters more than platform superiority. Colonel Nguyen Van Kock retires in 1975 with 9 confirmed kills and returns to teaching new pilots the same discipline that defined his career. Follow the vectors, trust the controllers, execute without hesitation. Lieutenant Pham Thanh Nguyen survives the war, achieves 8 confirmed kills, and later describes his role as the hand that executes what the mind decides. General Phung That Thai, the architect of North Vietnam's GCI integration, lives until 2008, long enough to see modern air forces adopt centralized control systems that validate his 1966 vision. The 921st and 927th Fighter Regiments are honored as heroes of the People's Air Force, awarded not for individual brilliance but for collective discipline. The Americans remember Robin Olds, Randy Cunningham, and Steve Ritchie as aces who fought brilliantly in impossible conditions. The Vietnamese remember ground control intercept officers whose names never appear in histories, but whose voices on the radio decided outcomes. The radio call Vector 270 fades from memory, but its legacy persists in every modern air force that prioritizes network integration over cockpit autonomy. The myth that missile-age fighters would dominate through speed and technology dies slowly, replaced by the understanding that coordination and information win wars. The MiG-21 is retired, but the lesson it teaches endures. The F-4 Phantom survives in service until 1996, eventually outfitted with data links and network connections that its Vietnam-era crews lacked. The gap between myth and reality closes as American doctrine evolves to match the system North Vietnam deployed in 1966. The evolution takes a decade, but it is permanent. Air superiority is redefined. Not the best aircraft, but the best informed aircraft. Not the fastest climb, but the best positioning. Not individual aces, but integrated networks. The radio call becomes doctrine. The network becomes the weapon. North Vietnam proves that discipline and information beat raw speed, a lesson written in the wreckage of 60 to 90 American aircraft that never saw the MiGs behind them. The skies over Vietnam teach a lesson the missile age forgot. Networks and discipline beat raw speed when information is asymmetric. The MiG-21 is not the weapon. The Ground Control Intercept system is the weapon, and the radio call Vector 270 is its trigger. American fighters bring better technology. North Vietnamese controllers bring better orchestration. The myth assumes superior machines win. The reality proves superior coordination wins. Networks and discipline beat raw speed in Vietnam.